Welcome back to the Sportsnaut interview. And joining us again is Charean Williams from Pro Football Talk, longtime NFL writer, one of my favorite. And we got to talk about free agency. I know, people get so excited for the beginning of the new year, Charean, and then all the big names go off the board, and there's still a lot of things happening because remember, NFL depth, folks. That's what I keep telling people.
Yeah.
But when you look at this period, this early signing period, and what happened in the NFL, talk about some of your winners and losers. I mean, I start with the Texans right there in your home state. Houston, what they were able to do. Talk a little bit about how they're going all in. C.J. Stroud on that rookie contract. They like the kid. He did a great job. Talk a little bit about the Texans, and then tell me what your overall impressions of free agency have been.
Yeah, I like what the Texans have done. I think they filled in some holes. They obviously lost some guys, but I think they replaced those guys with maybe some upgrades at some positions. So I really like where they are. You talked about the depth. This is a perfect example of that. Derek Barnett, the Eagles cut him. He had been benched in Philadelphia. He comes to Houston, claimed off waivers, plays really well, had a sack in 2 postseason games, really plays well down the stretch, 2.5 sacks for Houston in 6 games, 4 of which were starts. And that's the kind of depth you're talking about. That's the kind of guys you need if you want to win in this league, especially on both lines. Bill Parcells is the one who taught me you win on the lines. If you got a good offensive line and a good defensive line, you're going to win a lot of games. And I think that's what the Texans have done here. I think they've really got that depth on defense, especially in the defensive line. So I like the re-signing of Derek Barnett. We're in, like as you said, that second week of free agency, so it's those one-year contracts, right? Guys that didn't get the deals that they really wanted, so they're going on one-year contracts now, and that's where we are in free agency, and it's those depth guys, and they're going to be very important because a lot of these guys will end up starting because we know there's going to be injuries.
Oh, yeah, always. Now we got to go a little bit upstate. Right, the Dallas Cowboys. If you remember, end of the season, Jerry Jones, quote unquote, says we're all in, and everyone's kind of sitting there waiting for the Cowboys to make some moves. What's going on in Jerry world, and what does this mean for the Cowboys?
Well, let's go all the way back to 2012. 2012, they made a huge splash. Day one, they signed Brandon Carr to a $50.1 million contract, huge contract, filled in a huge hole for them. They also signed Kyle Orton to a big contract to be Tony Romo's backup. They signed Dan Connor, the linebacker. They signed a couple of guards, made a huge splash in 2012. It didn't pay off, obviously. They didn't win a Super Bowl with those guys. So 2013, they changed their MO. They was, all right, we're going to draft really well. And they have. For the most part, they've drafted really well since 2013. We're going to draft really well. We're going to sign these guys to second contracts. And this is going to be our core. This is how we're going to win. And they've contended doing that, but they haven't gotten over that hump. So at some point, you have to decide, are we going to take that next step and maybe a free agent here or a free agent there will help us fill in those gaps to get us over the hump? Or are we just going to keep relying on these guys? Now, so they've done the same thing. And Cowboys fans probably would have accepted that, except for the fact, as you said, that Jerry Jones said we're all in. All in means we're thinking Rams. We're thinking push the chips in the middle of the table, trade for players, give up all your draft picks, sign guys at free agency, do all those types of things. And, of course, money-wise, they couldn't do that anyway. But Jerry got everybody hyped up that that's what they were going to do. So Cowboys fans now feel duped, right? They were going to go all in. This isn't all in. This isn't anyone's definition of all in except maybe Jerry Jones' definition of all in. And he tried to walk it back, but it was too late. So, it's what they've done since 2013. But the fact that Jerry Jones set the bar higher for this year, got Cowboys fans excited for what they were going to do in free agency. And not only have they not signed free agents, Eric Kendricks is it, but they haven't re-signed their own guys. They've let almost everyone walk out the door. They re-signed their long snapper, Trent Sieg. They re-signed Jordan Lewis, the slot corner. But, Jonathan Hankins walked out the door, Tony Pollard, Tyron Smith. They're all walking out the door. And now you look at this team and you see all the holes they have, left tackle, running back, Interior of the defensive line, still probably need another linebacker, maybe need another corner. Like, what are you doing? Third receiver, they cut Michael Gallup. Leighton Vander Esch retired. So they've lost way more than they've gained. So as of today, there's a long way to go. As of today, right now, this is a worse team than the one that lost to San Francisco in the wild card round of the playoffs at home. They have a lot of work to do, and I'm not sure that just the draft is going to get them there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You talk about, hey, look, some teams' philosophy is to go out, sign free agents, and kind of do that. You see teams like the Green Bay Packers who don't do that, right? They are committed, right or wrong, they're committed to bringing in young guys, seeing how they play, giving them a second contract if they do well, but they're committed to it and they kind of stick to it. And so the Cowboys, to your point about setting an expectation and then losing players, they didn't sign some of these guys back to where you said, okay, well, at least they've stayed pat. So it's going to be fascinating to watch what they do there. Also, I want to get your comments too and your thoughts about, you talked about the Cowboys needing a running back. The running back market, remember last year, all the hubbub around the running backs not getting value, as they called it, from a player perspective, but that was the market value. This year we had a ton of running backs on the open market. They get signed early, and people are saying, well, the running back market's back. And yes, it is from a signing perspective. Right. The money, though, again, it's short-term deals. It's not big long-term deals like we used to see.
No, it's really not. It's those $8 million a year deals and as you said, short-term deals that we've seen these guys get. And the reason is, obviously, because teams feel like they can go find a running back, in the later rounds of the draft. And, you look at A-Chain, who I watched, Devon A-Chain. I watched him at A&M every game he played. I think he was a 5th-round draft pick of the Dolphins. Now, he was hurt part of last year, but you just look at what he did last year. So you feel like you can draft a guy in the 4th round, 5th round, and he can come in and contribute for it. Maybe not as a starter, and I think that's what the Cowboys are relying on. And again, have a little bit of a problem with that. If you're relying on a rookie to start for you at running back, I think that has disaster written all over it just from protection standpoint. But yeah, I just think teams have gotten to the point where they feel like they can draft those guys. And I think it's becoming the same at the receiver position. The receivers came off the board very, very slowly. I think Gabe Davis for a while might have been the only receiver who signed a contract. And again, those weren't the contracts that those guys probably expected in free agency. And so teams just think they can go and draft receivers, and the college game has changed so much, and those receivers can step right in and be number 1 receivers, be number 2 receivers, so they don't feel like they have to go and pay on the free agent market. So those two positions, because the colleges have gotten so much better in those two areas, teams feel like they can draft those guys and not have to use 1st and even 2nd round picks to get a good running back, to get a good receiver. And that's what they've done. So, yeah, that's what we're seeing. You're right. They came off the board early. The Austin Ecklers and the Aaron Jones and all the Derrick Henrys, all those guys came off the board early, but they didn't get probably nearly the contract that they wanted.
Yeah, and I wonder, too, because this running back class in the draft isn't great. I mean, there's some good players there, but not as good as it's been in previous years, so maybe some teams were kind of hedging their bets there. One last free agent question for you, and that was, obviously, Kirk Cousins goes to the Falcons. Are the Falcons now primed for the NFC South there? What did you think of the move they made, where they're at? Arthur Blank, obviously desperate. He wants to win. But what did you think of that move and what it's going to do for the Falcons?
Well, they now have a quarterback you can win with. Now, I know Kirk Cousins hasn't been successful in the postseason, which is why I think the Vikings had a number and they weren't going to go past that number, thinking he's only gotten us so far. Yes, we've contended during the regular season when he's been healthy, but he hasn't gotten us to where we want to go. And, it's sort of what the Rams decided with Jared Goff. They decided it was time to go and I'm not saying that, the Vikings are going to get a Matthew Stafford who's going to lead them to the Super Bowl right away, but I think that was their thinking, same type of thinking that they had is he's only taken us so far, it's time to try something else. Where the Falcons, I think it was a really good move for the Falcons because it's a division, as you said, that I think they're probably the favorites right now because they had everything else in place and they were just kind of in that middling. We used to say that 8-8. It's not 8-8 anymore, but that 7-win, kind of in the middle of the road type team. But they had all the weapons that a quarterback could want, and he's stepping into a great situation with Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and just all the weapons they had and all the guys that they've added to that. I just think this is going to be a really good offense. Their defense is decent. I think I agree with you. I think they're probably the favorite in that division. I think they're capable of winning that division, and I don't see them as a Super Bowl team. Again, Kirk Cousins hasn't been successful in the postseason, but I think they're in that conversation of they can go and win a first-round playoff game at home and get to that divisional round, and then who knows what happens when they get to the division. Sort of like the Bucs this year, frankly. They gave the Lions all they could handle in that second-round game and almost came close, not almost, but they came close to getting to the championship round. So you never know what's going to happen. So I like what the Falcons have done, getting their quarterback. We'll see who ends up as a quarterback of the Vikings, but they got some work to do there.
They do, and we keep hearing they might try to move up in the draft, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Now, when you look at free agency this year, was there something that just screamed at you, stuck out as a great, maybe under the radar move, or a move that you think is a big difference maker for a team out there that maybe people are missing?
Well, we haven't talked about the Chiefs a whole lot, but look at what they've done. They made really two moves, but they were two huge moves and probably underrated moves. Getting Chris Jones back was huge. He was the number one free agent in this free agent class. They couldn't let him walk away from a defensive perspective. And I don't know, that defense, for as good as they were last year, to me, they were underrated last year. I just think what Spags did with that defense was that's the reason they won the Super Bowl, was that defense was that good.
Yes.
Now, we all know Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. I had an MVP vote. I voted Patrick Mahomes for MVP. I'm not going to lie, but Chris Jones easily could have been the MVP of that Super Bowl. He was that good. That defense was that good. They made the difference. Defense wins championships, as we've heard for so long. So I just love that, getting Chris Jones back to that defense. They're going to be as good, I think, as they were. We'll see. L'Jarius Sneed's probably still going to be traded. That's still a move that's yet to be made by the Chiefs. But then getting Hollywood Brown. Now, I think Hollywood Brown is a little bit overrated for what he's done, the numbers he's put up in the league, especially the last 2 years. And I realize the Cardinals, Kyler Murray was hurt. I get all that. Missed time both seasons. I understand. But he hasn't put up the type of numbers. We always say receivers are going to get their numbers regardless who the quarterback is. He hasn't really done that. But teams are obsessed with his speed. They see his speed. They love it. The Chiefs finally have that speed guy that they haven't had since really Tyreek Hill. And I think they have their number one receiver in Rashee Rice. And so I think that receiving core was upgraded. So two moves, but to me, two huge moves to help the Chiefs have a chance at that three-peat. And probably under the radar a little bit for just having two moves with what they've done. And one of them is a guy re-signing.
Yeah, and I agree, because I've heard a lot of people talk, the Chiefs were quiet. I'm like, what? They signed the biggest free agent. I know it kind of gets skipped because he was already on the team, so I get that part of it. But you're right about the Super Bowl. Amazing time he had there. One last question before I let you go, because I know we're going to now start moving towards the draft. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because it seems to me, and it might just be because there's more of an echo chamber than ever with so many channels out there, so many people talking about the NFL, and that is this quarterback class in the draft. So deep as we hear, but as we get closer and closer, we know it's lying season. We know we get agents and other people saying all kinds of things publicly to push narratives. But I've never seen, I don't think in the last several years, a quarterback class that was so highly touted that now we're seeing people starting to pick apart even the top pick in Caleb Williams, who we assume is going to the Bears. What do you make of that? And are we getting to the point where you can't really get good, true evaluation of quarterbacks outside an NFL building because there's just so much talk about it?
I'm not sure you can get good quarterback ratings within a building. I mean, you look at all the misses that teams have had, they don't get it right. So much less anyone outside the building getting it right. Let's go back to last year. What were you hearing about C.J. Stroud? Oh, he's dumb. He did horrible on the mental aspect of the combine. Like, he's not going to make it in the NFL. I wouldn't draft him, wouldn't touch him. People had him falling down their draft board. The Texans stuck true to their draft board, took C.J. Stroud. We saw what C.J. Stroud did. But, you just have all this chatter. And for all the chatter, there are going to be some of these quarterbacks who are going to be good, and some of them are not going to be good. The great thing about the way the rookie wage scale is now compared to, let's say, Sam Bradford when he went number 1 overall, and they're really handcuffed, the Rams are, by his contract for a long time. Well, you don't have that anymore. So if he doesn't work out, you're 2 years of suffering. You're probably changing head coaches, probably changing general managers, but you got a chance to get it right, a couple of years from now. And the free agent market has more quarterbacks on it than it used to. So you've got a chance to get it right. So, yeah, I think the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams. And Jaden Daniels, I think, is rated I know for a fact, is rated very highly with at least one team in that top 5. And he's not going to have to wait long to hear his name. Some of them that interest me are more like the Bo Nix type quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And quarterbacks always go higher than a lot of them, higher than some of them should, simply because the team gets desperate and, we got to have a quarterback. The Vikings are going to be an example of that. We'll see how high they feel like they have to move and who they end up with. But they're a team right now that's going to get desperate and say, we've got to get up. We've got to get our quarterback, got to get our quarterback, got to get a quarterback. And so how high do they move? What do they give up to get up there to get him? Or do they stand pat and take one of those lower guys, sort of like what the Patriots did with Mac Jones? And again, some of these are going to work out and some of them are not going to work out. So, it's a roll of the dice for these teams to draft a quarterback, which I think is why the Falcons wanted to do what they did, which is get a proven veteran quarterback in Kirk Cousins rather than try to trade up like the Vikings are doing, move up high enough to get a quarterback that you really want.
Yeah, and I've said it, and I talked to one general manager, a couple scouts at the Combine who told me the same thing. Basically, it's like, look, because of what you mentioned, rookie contracts, the most valuable thing in the NFL is a quarterback on a rookie contract. And guess what? You can admit your mistake and move on quickly, and hopefully you still have your job, right? You mentioned that NFL, if it's not for long, right? If you don't do well, if you pick the wrong quarterback, but look what we saw in Chicago, right? We saw in Chicago, Justin Fields now goes to the Steelers. They obviously weren't convinced, and they moved on. And you can do that versus what you gave a great example with Sam Bradford and the Rams. So it's going to be fascinating to watch how this unfolds, and I think there'll be some unexpected twists and turns, as there always is. And we appreciate it. And we'll get to talk to you again after we get to the draft. So Charean Williams from Pro Football Talk, thank you so much for joining us here on the Sportsnaut interview.
Scott, thanks for having me.